A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Dibbity da
A
dee
dee da dee dee do do dee da ba dee do. What's going on? No, just kidding. Wrong song.
What's going on? That song rules. Great music video. Sad he had to get his penis removed though. That crazy frog. Remember that little? You know, he used to have a penis. Those French people, they're
conservative to say the least.
Well, they weren't. That's why they gave him a penis in the first place. That just was dangling out there. But you know, now Crazy Frog doesn't have a penis, and I guess that's, you know, maybe that was his decision. We don't know. So we can't hate, we can't yearn for it back because maybe that's what he wanted. But you know. Anyways, welcome back to Stacked episode 94. We have fun here. Yeah, where it's, you know, if you heard the hamster music, you know what time of the year it is. It's a Halloween-a-thon. Because hamsters are fucking scary. Hamsters are scary. They eat each other. Have you seen hamsters go at each other and eat each other?
I've never seen one eat it, but I know they're surprisingly ruthless. I know that.
They're carnivorous creatures. It's something you wouldn't expect, you know, because they're they're hamsters. Anyways, yeah, Stacked episode 94. We're back at it talking horror movies, but specifically sequels to horror movies. Now, we did have another topic for this week, but I guess for 2/3 of us it was too hard. You know, sorry, Chris. You know, Chris had all of his movies. But Brandon and I were kind of numbskulls today, and
Gubba.
we were kind of gubbing it. So we decided to do something a little bit easier. Yay! But actually wasn't that easy because horror sequels often suck.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this was hard. This was way harder.
This was
we
easy.
could have done a great episode of the worst horror sequels. I think that would have been. Maybe we should save that for next Halloween-a-thon. But you know, this year we're gonna do the best ones. You know, it's a fine bunch in my opinion, at least of the ones I've seen. But yeah, Brandon, you were the one who suggested this. Why did you think horror sequels? Of all topics, why did you do this one?
Halloween Ends came out last week.
Oh yeah.
So it just made sense to me.
Evil died that night.
Hopefully. I don't know.
Quite frankly,
I doubt it.
I'm not going to say anything because I'm the only one here who's seen it.
Why did
it's a crazy movie, though. It's a bizarre ass movie, and you know, I wish we could have all gone together as the group like we did for Halloween Kills, just to experience the absolute insanity that is the very end of Halloween Ends. I think it's the most I've ever laughed in a horror film. I don't know if it was supposed to be ironic or unironic, but weird ass movie. So we're gonna be talking about horror sequels, you know, something that's been tried and true in Hollywood is, you know, if you have a good horror film, gotta make a sequel, you know, and you know, for me, I felt like there's lots of different directions that horror sequels can go about, you know. I feel like one of those is to world build, you know, because a lot about a horror mystery is a big part of a horror film, and I feel like a lot of horror sequels try to flush out that mystery, and I'd say most of the time it completely fails, but there are a couple that do a good job of fleshing out sort of the world that this horror film takes place. Then I think mixing another genre is another successful way, and then I think being meta about horror filmmaking is another way. So that's sort of how I constructed my stack, guys. Brandon, what about you, since you came up with this? So like, how did you decipher your quintessential horror sequels?
I wanted to not rely too heavily on one subgenre of horror, so I definitely did my spreading out. So I'm going to have... This isn't a spoiler because there's lots of films, but I wanted to do a supernatural film. I wanted to do a slasher movie, and I wanted to do something that was kind of like a monster movie. Because like there's like sequels to all sorts of horror films and many different genres or subgenres of horror, and I think those three really stood out to me the most. So I didn't want to pick one thing because I didn't want to just do like 3 Leprechaun sequels, Friday the 13th films, and like like there's more to. Even though there's like an abundance of sequels, they're not always good.
Right.
So
that's good. Chris, what about you? Since you it seemed like you struggled with this.
Yeah, so for me, like what I immediately realized when I started trying to gather picks, like potential selections, is I realize I don't actually have that much knowledge on horror sequels. A lot of my knowledge of horror in the horror genre rests on the shoulders of either original films or remakes. It's actually kind of rare that I dig deeper into the sequels. Like, for example, I'm very familiar with the Friday the 13th original and a couple of the things, and like Texas Chainsaw, love the original, could not care less about the sequels. But but thing is, I haven't seen them. But there are some exceptions to the rule, like Nightmare on Elm Street. I've seen all of them, but like that first one's the only one that absolutely sticks with me. The other ones are still really good though, and I'm quite confident we'll see one or two of those pop up, but we'll see. But anyway, for my picks, I decided to just pull together a selection of what I could. And what I realized when I started putting it together is that I noticed that horror sequels often find ways to evolve and twist themselves to fit in new themes or ideas. So it usually ends up altering the genre of the film to some extent. So sometimes they'll stick straight to the formula and stick straight to what they had before, but other times they'll let it evolve and change with the movie. And so throughout my stack, you'll see like it starts off with a movie, like a sequel that sticks very closely to what had come before, and it slowly gets more and more distant from it as we go on. But we'll get into that as I go on.
All right, so before we get into our picks, let's of course, actually, before we go into our picks, I want to run down honorable mentions because there are some final stack movies that are horror sequels that we're not going to talk about today, but I still want to shout them out. First one is New Nightmare. I think is a great horror sequel. The Conjuring 2. That is like...
That would have been on my list. Absolutely
that
on my list.
Probably would have been on my list too. Evil Dead 2 would have absolutely been on my list.
Yep. I saw that popping up a lot when I was researching.
Yeah. And then for me, also 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah, 10 Cloverfield. I was also eyeing that one.
So yeah, lots of good ones. I mean, I'm sure. Are you guys Nightmare on Elm Street 3 fans? I haven't seen that one, but that's one we've talked about.
I prefer 4.
Yeah, I know Brandon likes 4 more. I think 3 tends to be one of the more popular ones among like the sequels.
And then
yeah.
We've also talked about Saw 3 and 4. Pick that for our final stack.
Saw 6.
Have
Saw
we never
6,
even picked the first Saw? Have we never picked the first one?
Have we ever mentioned it?
Surely.
I think we have. I think we have picked it, but I only wrote down the list of horror sequels. So maybe we have. I'd have to consult the list again. Anyways, those are some I wanted to shout out. Jack Frost 2, also. That is a sequel that's better than the original.
Yes.
But yeah, so those are some honorable mentions. You won't hear them on this episode, but just know we do love them very much. All right, on to the rules of the show. Once a week, we set a topic or theme and go our separate ways to construct our own 3-film stack. Then after a week, we come back here on the podcast and share our own stacks 1 film at a time. Then at the end of the show, we will mix and match our 9 films to make the ultimate decision on what quintessential 3-film stack we are checking out of this hypothetical video store. Alrighty. I'm up first. Whew. Alright, let's see. I'm trying to figure out my order still. I think I'm going to go with my horror sequel that I really appreciate. It expands the lore of the world a bit more. You know, sometimes some of the greatest thing about horror films is the lore that they build. And this one is probably the horror franchise whose lore I love the most, but also whose lore I feel like has been bastardized the most. Um, neither of you two have seen a single film in this franchise.
Oh,
I'm
I know where this
I've
is
kind
going.
of been on a kick of it lately. I just watched the entire franchise within a span of a couple weeks. I'm picking Hellbound Hellraiser 2 as my first horror sequel. Um I am just in awe of the brain of Clive Owen. This dude, he has created his own version of hell that is so unique, and
I don't want to
um
correct you, but I kind of want to correct you.
it's not Clive Owen. What's his name? Clive Barker.
Clive
It's Clive
Barker.
Barker. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I was looking around, I was like, what is his name? Is Clive Owen's an actor, right? Yeah, Clive Owen's an actor. So sorry, everybody. Wrong Clive. I didn't have Clive Barker's name because this is not directed by Clive Barker. It was produced and written by him, but it was directed by Tony Randall, which I have in my notes. But Clive Barker, this dude, created something so unique, in the world of horror when he made that first Hellraiser movie. I mean, it's the film that basically kicked off sort of gore porn, and extreme body horror. Um, with that first Hellraiser movie. And he, for those who are unaware about the world of Hellraiser, neither of you two are because you've never seen a Hellraiser film. The film revolves around this puzzle box. It's called the Lament Configuration, and when you solve the puzzle box, it basically opens a gateway to hell and summons these creatures called the Cenobites. That's who Pinhead is. I bet you guys have all seen Pinhead. He's the guy with a bunch of dang nails in his head. There's a bunch of other guys too. They are basically servants of a fallen angel, the Leviathan, who's almost is like an Evangelion angel. Is just like a big prism, who is just like, he is the god of flesh and pain, I believe. And one other thing I forgot it was, but basically when you open the puzzle box, these guys come for you and they torture you because the Cenobites exist purely on euphoria through the sensation of pain. They love pain and they want to feel that sensation through whoever opens the puzzle box. So that's sort of the mystery that we sort of have in the first film. Here we really get to dive into this hell that Clive Barker has constructed. See, because the characters actually go to hell in this film as opposed to hell coming to them in the first one. And we just get to see more lore about who the Cenobites are. I don't want to... The Cenobites. It's Cenobites. I always say Cenobites. It's Cenobites. Who the Cenobites are, how they came to be, what hell looks like in this distorted, very labyrinthian, MC Escher-esque world. The staircases that go all over the place. And it's not as strong as that first one. That one really makes a really great impression with its effects. And, it's simple story that sort of gives you enough, but leaves a lot to, ponder about. The story's not as good as this one, but for that, I'm just doing a good job of, exploring more of the world, but not explaining it, at all. That's why I had to include Hellraiser 2 on this list. Pretty much the only Hellraiser film, now that I've seen them all, besides this, the original and the remake, those are the only ones you really need to see. It goes pretty downhill after this one, which has honestly made me appreciate this film more because the rest of ones just don't care about the lore and the world building at all. So that's why I had to choose this one and shout it out. I'm bummed that I'm talking about this one before I'm talking about the original, but that's why I'm picking Hellraiser. Now, I am shocked neither of you two have ever seen a Hellraiser film because you guys have seen all of, at least one of, the... I don't know. Chris is giving me a I don't know face, because you guys have seen Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. I feel like Pinhead is he's one of those guys, of the 80s horror. No, he's not. All right, Chris, tell me about it. You're you're shaking your head.
No, I'm kidding. I don't know what to make of it. It just never found its way into my viewing experience with these slasher films, and I don't know. It just I don't know if maybe he just doesn't have the same degree of long term like effect that a lot of the other ones have had, but evidently he does because he keeps getting movies. And there's how many of them are there, Ethan?
There's 11 of them.
Oh, Jesus Christ. There's more.
And I will
Okay,
say
wow.
the reason why I think he's not as iconic is he is so inconsistent. After the first two Hellraiser movies, like Pinhead is like, he's not really a character. He's more like a force of nature, you know, a being, as Brandon would say, in the first two Hellraiser movies. But then in Hellraiser 3, he becomes more of like a Freddy Krueger character, where he's like, he's doing things just to kill, and he's quipping, you know? And then after that one, he becomes sort of like this evil, maniacal guy who wants to bring hell to Earth and dominate the world, you know? And then after that, he becomes something completely different. And it's just like, I think that's why he's not as iconic as the rest of the guys, because, I mean, Freddy and Jason, they're just silent, so there's nothing really need to, like, that's just their character.
You mean Freddy and Michael? Or no, Michael and
Jason and Michael, sorry. But Freddy's the one,
Freddy
the
is
quippy
talkative.
One, you know?
He's talkative boy.
One. Yeah. He's not always quippy, but he's talkative, you know? And that's sort of his thing. And, you know, they tried to do a bunch with Pinhead. They tried to make him both Freddy and, you know, Jason and Michael, and it just didn't work, you know? But if they stuck it through like these first two Hellraiser movies, like Hellraiser 2, Hellbound, I think he could have been his own awesome, unique thing, you know? But what do you got? What do you guys think about Hellraiser? You've never seen him. What's your impression of this series?
Seems very odd. Yeah, it seems like it's very lore heavy, which maybe might be a big thing that's like holding me back from it. Because I feel like a lot of the other ones are pretty easy to just jump right into and comprehend just like that.
You don't have to commit to like Friday the 13th or Nightmare, even though Nightmare has.
They're all pretty succinct on their own, and like doesn't need much like further exploration other than what's given to you in the movies. But it feels like Hellraiser seems just so dense in comparison. But also while you were talking, Ethan, I was thinking about this. I feel like each of us individually, Brandon definitely has multiple of these, but we each have like certain slasher franchises that we have like a weird affectation for. So you, Ethan, is Hellraiser. I think mine apparently is Chucky. And Brandon loves, you like Nightmare, you like Scream, you like what else?
I'm a Wes Craven. I'm a Wes Craven head.
Yeah, you're a Wes Craven.
You love Wes Craven. Big Wes Craven.
And because he got me into horror, he was like my John Carpenter. If I'm comparing my analogy for Ethan. And then I don't know, I would say I'm interested in the Leprechaun movies. They're not good, but I'm interested.
You're a Leprechaun guy. You know?
I mean, Warwick Davis really does something for me.
Because he's the exact opposite of you in every way.
What does that mean? What's that supposed to mean?
What does that mean for you? Why are you so interested in him?
The Leprechaun?
Or Warwick Davis in The Leprechaun?
He's just an entertaining fella. So you're saying I'm not entertaining? Is that what you're saying?
We'll leave the
anyway.
we'll leave that up to the listeners. Anyways, Brandon, you're up next. What's your first horror sequel?
All right, I haven't really. Oh, what should go first? All right, I'm gonna do one that Ethan walked in on me, trying to buy today. Dawn of the Dead, 1978.
Yep.
I knew someone would pick Romero.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of every film in his trilogy, but Dawn of the Dead is like the commonplace, like, oh, everybody thinks it's great. And I wasn't sure because it was the hardest to find of all of them. And I was like, why is it so hard to find if it's so good, you know? And when I finally ended up checking out the movie, I found it on YouTube, like a 4K director's cut of it. I was very impressed because I had seen the remake by Zack Snyder first, and I thought that was okay. But like this completely blows it out of the water. You know, I grew up playing like a bunch of zombie games as a kid, video games. Like what was really popular when we were growing up, Dead Rising, you know, stuff like
I remember that. Yeah.
And COD Zombies was also
right.
Dead Island, you know. Yeah, zombies were a big thing growing up. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that was like the Walking Dead came about when we were teenagers or tweens.
Yeah.
And it was just it was everything that I wanted in a zombie movie. It felt classic, but it didn't feel like it was like stale, you know? Because sometimes if you rewatch an older movie, you can just see the tropes, and this has it, but it doesn't feel stale because the characters are interesting. And I think Romero's really good at that, like in all three of his Dead films that I've seen. Um, but here, especially, like it's claustrophobic, even though they're in a massive mall, but that also lends like a lot of imagination to what the characters can do and how they can live out their lives, this new life. And I really enjoy that. It's not as good. I go back and forth if this is better than the original or not, because I really love Night of the Living Dead for like establishing the genre and having the bravery of having a character who's the lead, who's a person of color in the 1960s in like a modern. I mean, it's not a massive film, you know, but it definitely was a cult classic, and the way they handled race in the film was excellent. And here, it's like it's good, but it's not up to par with what he was doing in the first one, with that analogy. But it works, and I really love this film. Love the kills, love the characters. Very tense, very scary. A breezy watch. Even the director's cut, which is super long, is like breezy as hell. But yeah, love this movie.
Yeah, I think I don't know which one I like more. This one or the original Night of the Living Dead. But Romero's trilogy I think is all good. I do think Day of the Dead is the weakest. Just because I think there's sort of an emptiness left to it that the others, don't have. There's a lot more going on in the original two. But I would say that, like, even though Night of the Living Dead is the original, I feel like Dawn of the Dead cemented what zombies are, if that makes any sense.
I get that. Because Romero kind of wrote the book on it, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was in like literature and stuff like that, but it had never been depicted on screen before these films. And I think he established like the iconography.
Right.
Behind,
and like people would consider like Frankenstein's monster a zombie. But now, like, we know that those are two separate things. Frankenstein's monster, even though he was something brought back from the dead, it's not a zombie. Zombies are like flesh eating, like brainless, slow walking creatures, which people have, evolved and developed on their own thing. But that's the baseline, is what Romero created in this film is the baseline of what zombies are. That's the foundation, and you can build off of that. I think this film is good. It certainly established the mall setting as something that's like iconic to the zombie genre, because it's like, I don't know, like if you were surviving a zombie apocalypse, that's like a perfect place to go. It just made too much sense, Yeah, and so many other games, did Dead Rising did one in a zombie, in a mall, right?
Yeah. Dead Rising 2 was in a mall, I think.
Yeah.
The first one was like, I think in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
And the second one was in the mall. Or maybe like there were aspects I'm intertwining them, because I remember going over to my friend's house to play them as a kid.
Yeah.
And it was like the dream, because I'm like, imagine being trapped inside a mall. Now it's like sad and dystopian to think that,
Yeah. When you're a kid, like, oh, that'd be so cool. But now if you're trapped in a mall now, you're just like, oh, it's just, purse stores and like watch stores, and then it's just
I guess I'll go to Spencer's.
I guess I'll go to Sephora. I don't know. Eat makeup. Chris, what do you think about this movie?
I've not seen this one. I've only seen the original.
Oh,
yeah,
damn.
I've only seen one Romero film, and it's the original. I remember I watched it right when like the Call of Duty Zombies era of my life, and my God, did that consume my life at the time. There's a map where George Romero is like haunting you. It's crazy. It's one of the expansion maps. He literally haunts you. He's holding like a stick with a light on it, like a film light. It's weird. But anyway, yeah. So I haven't seen this movie, but I've heard great things. I've heard especially the mall locale is really well utilized, and I can imagine very much that it would be, because I feel like that that whole like liminal space sensation you get especially
Yeah.
when you imagine that feeling in a mall, you know, like
Yeah.
one of those old rundown malls. I imagine that complements really well actually with the zombie thing, and I mean I would hope that that was taken advantage of for this film. Um, but yeah, I mean like I have been sold on Romero for a while. I just haven't taken the time to look into more of his films, but maybe I should. Um, yeah, you got my thumbs up for this one.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, what is your horror sequel that you give a
All
thumbs up
right.
to as well? Huh?
Well, my first one, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this one because I've talked about this one before. Well, I think I have, or it's been discussed before. I'm sure. I'm picking uh 2013 Fede Alvarez film. I'm picking Evil Dead, the remake. Well, the reboot quel actually. Um,
Ah,
yes.
it's good. Very
Also, a
good.
good opportunity to talk about reboot quels in this world of horror sequels because there's a lot of them. Almost every franchise at least has one, maybe even two if they're really struggling. But okay, so Evil Dead takes place in the like it is strictly speaking is a sequel to the original film, but it is so far removed from it narratively speaking that
Yeah.
it may as well just be a remake on its own, but strictly speaking it is a sequel. So yeah, Evil Dead tells the story of a young woman struggling with sobriety. Her and her friends take her to a remote cabin where they unearth a really terrible curse and things go fucking crazy from there. The brutality in this movie is still some of the most gruesome things I've seen in quite some time in watching films. There is images in this film that still kind of haunt me a little bit. There's a scene with a tongue and a knife, and I'll just leave it there. There's a lot of just gruesome imagery here, and I think in the context of a sequel, I think this movie works really well because it plays it completely straight. Like the original Evil Dead does like kind of have a campiness to it, which Raimi really does a fantastic job with honing. But with this one, Alvarez really commits to the darkness of it and is relentless with it. And I think because he knew that he wanted to do something unique to his own and wasn't willing to like copy or do anything or do something that had absolutely come before, it kind of benefits the film because now it stands on its own. I see this movie as pretty much its own separate entity from the original film. And I think that works really well. I think that's actually a great compliment I could pay to many great sequels because I think a great sequel should be able to stand on its own, such as Mamma Mia 2. Am I right, Brandon? Can I get a what up?
No.
What up, Mamma
There we
Mia
go.
2 fans? Beep.
Stop it.
Um,
Stop it. Stop it.
But okay, well that's pretty much all there is to say about Evil Dead 2. It's a really fun movie, really gross. Would not recommend eating while watching this one.
No.
But still fun. It's a good time. Yeah. Also, I was just looking at my review. My review specifically notes that Ethan's commentary throughout the film makes it much less intimidating of a film. So if you ever want to watch it, get Ethan to watch it with you.
What? I don't even remember. Like, I don't know.
I think this was just like your era of the whole like I ain't going in there thing.
My whole Shaggy dialed up to 11 era. Yeah, basically what I remember about this film is, and I said this in my review because I'm looking it over because I don't remember much about Evil Dead. It's been so long. When did we watch this? When we had that Fede Alvarez double feature between this and Don't Breathe. That was 2 years ago. My God.
Wow, I thought it was a little farther away.
Really? It was in 2019. No, that's 3 years. Wait, what year is it? That's 3 years ago. What the hell, guys? 3 years ago, we were sitting in the fucking
In our mine and Brandon's old place.
at the Panther Village watching movies. God damn.
What a time in our lives that was.
What a
magical
time.
era.
Yeah, that was a very magical era. But yeah, Evil Dead. I think it's weird. It's like I feel like it's on par with the first Evil Dead because while it does like it exemplifies everything that makes the first Evil Dead so good. I'm talking the scares, the gore, just the eeriness, the creepiness, just the violence of it all. That's exemplified, and it's all the cooler in here. But I feel like what also makes the first Evil Dead not so great is also seen here. I think like
Hmm.
the characters are pretty poor.
Yeah, they're
poorly
dull.
written.
They're dull as fuck.
They're dull
I
as
couldn't
fuck.
care less.
I couldn't care less about the you know the addict recovering and everything like that. But at the same time, you know, that's not what you're seeing this movie for. You're seeing it for like the crazy shit that happens, you know, and the
Yeah.
gross effects and everything. I remember seeing if you go onto the letterbox page, it's that backdrop image of like, you know, when the girl's locked in the basement and she's sort of peeping through, you know, the sort of door that's chained to the floor. I remember seeing that. I used to go on Yahoo a lot when I was a kid to get my news and stuff.
That's an embarrassing admission.
I know. I was a Yahoo
Oh,
kid.
you're like my dad. My dad still uses that shit.
Even though I used Google, but I went on Yahoo just because I liked reading the top storylines and like all the articles and stuff. But I was like,
I'm gonna go on Yahoo right now just to see what's going on.
Yahoo used to be one of my first tabs I'd click whenever I'd go on the internet. Just to see what's going on in the world. And like that's how I sometimes got movie news, was through Yahoo when I was a kid. Before I had Twitter and everything. But I remember this article always popped up. It was like the grossest horror movies. And it would always be that image from this Evil Dead. And I would be like, no way, man, I'm not watching that. You know, this is before I like loved horror movies, you know. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm watching that. That was so scary. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Brandon?
Any thoughts?
Very, very good movie. Very good movie. I disagree with you guys. I think the characters are fine because I think a lot of horror films don't even take the effort to establish or develop a character. And while I agree with most of the supporting cast, I do think there are 2 or 3 characters in there in this Evil Dead movie that work immensely better than anything in the previous films. You could say Bruce Campbell is a great characterization, but he is also in like 3 movies versus, well, technically 2, because Evil Dead 2 is technically like a remake.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird. They lost the rights, so they had to remake the movie, but they were like, we like the first story, but let's just do something else. It was weird.
Still call it Evil Dead 2. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's super weird story behind that, but I think with this, they did the best they could with like just a singular movie. And not only that, some of the best gore I've seen in a movie. Probably top 5 most goriest movies I've seen. I've seen like 300, 400 horror movies or something like that. And it's like up there with like Brain Dead, some of the early Peter Jackson stuff, you know, as like gory as hell. Tetsuo the Iron Man, which Ethan and I watched recently.
Finally watched that crazy ass
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. But yeah, very good. I like it.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I was just about to interject. You guys are talking about Tetsuo. I have been feeling the urge to just see it through and finish it.
I think you can do it, Chris.
I know. I only have 20 minutes left. I can probably brave it, but oh my god,
It
bro.
becomes like it becomes like a Dragon Ball movie at the end. It's so cool. It becomes like the end of Akira. I love
Ethan
it.
and I were eating.
I will say I find it fascinating that movie is like came out 1 year after Akira and also features a character named Tetsuo who, you know,
becomes an Iron Man. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like, but anyway, so yeah, that's my first pick, Evil Dead.
Love it. All right, we're going to the second round here. I'm like Chris. I'm gonna bring up a movie that we have talked about again. This is the only time I'm gonna do this. I couldn't. It's like I think it's a sequel that is just like stands out so much from the rest of its franchise. That I had to pick it. I'm picking Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, directed by our boy Tom McLaughlin, my intro to visual storytelling professor. Thank you for bearing with me when I made Gary's Pets and all that dumb shit. I hope he's proud of me.
Oh my
somewhere.
god.
But this is just everything that I want when I see when I like think about Friday the 13th, you know. It's got the best Jason in it, you know. It's got it's got great kills. It's so self-aware. this is sort of like the horror sequel that I picked, where it's like it's sort of implementing comedy now into its franchise and self-awareness, that it just makes it makes slashers fun, where sometimes I can't really take slashers seriously because it's so formulaic, and it's just like you're just waiting for kills to happen most of the time. That's what most of people just talk about. They just talk about how good were the kills, in in a slasher film. But this is just like, it has a fun time. It's like it's so poppy, and it's rocky, and yeah, it just makes fun of tropes of like, oh, don't have sex or you'll die in a slasher movie. I just remember having such a fun time with this, more fun than I've had with the first Friday the 13th and the 2009 remake. That's for sure. So that's why I picked Jason Lives.
Yeah, but the Friday the 13th like end is like great. The remake.
This one?
Yeah, no, the remake is great. The end, like what they did for the director's cut.
Well, that's, if you're talking about the director's cut, yes, that's true. Not many know this, but if you do ever get your hands on the director's cut of Friday the 13th, 2009, they make a really bold and creative decision to play the song Mambo Number 5 when the movie ends.
It's great.
I don't know
really
why
took us off guard when we saw it.
Yeah, I don't know why the world rejects this knowledge, because I've tried so hard to keep it on the Wikipedia page, but it just keeps getting deleted. I think my record of having that on the Wikipedia page, how long do you think? I think it was like 2 months. I remember we kept checking it, remember? We're like, how long is Wikipedia going to allow us to add like this one fact that like Mambo Number 5 plays in the director's cut of Friday the 13th? Anyways, that's probably a highlight of Friday the 13th, but it doesn't make it the best movie. Unfortunately, I think Jason Lives is the best. So that's why I chose it. What do you guys think?
Meh. I'm mixed.
You're mixed?
Yeah, I mean, as a slasher fanatic, I enjoy aspects of it. I don't mind when a slasher franchise it takes a more humorous approach to things. I mean, for God's sake, I love the Leprechaun movies and Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street, and all those definitely integrate comedy into the later installments, if not the first installment. And when I look at Friday the 13th, Part 6, it is very punk. And I love me some Tom McLaughlin. Guys, very fun to be around.
Yeah.
I'm just mixed on the movie. Like, I think the acting is pretty camp, but in a way, like, I can't get over. Like, the thing I love most about the horror franchise is that, like, embrace the comedy, is, like, the actors play it straight, but the movie and the director knows that it's not necessarily like funny, and or they do know it's funny, whereas like in this it's like so I feel like the actors are like, they know what they're in, and that schlockiness is like, it doesn't juxtapose with what the director knows, because the director's doing the same thing. And I mean, granted, it's like, it is funny in parts. Like, there's a lot of good homages to like other films out there. Like, there's a James Bond intro that is interesting, to say the least.
Oh yeah.
But like it tries to toe the line between being serious and being like silly, and I don't think it works all the time. Do I enjoy the film? Yes. Is it like one of the best Friday films? Yes, but I don't really love it. It's like it's kind of thin, to be honest.
Which just goes to show the quality of the Friday the 13th franchise, that it's one of the best, but
yeah,
this is how you feel about
yeah.
it. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, this one it's fine for my taste. I do remember when we watched it together; it was really fun. It's a very like, it embodies a lot of what I think like makes the 1980s such a fun era to throw horror into. So it works really well on that end. I do think McLaughlin does a really good job with handling the comedy of this one. I think it's very well balanced and also like genuinely is funny. Um, in my review, I have a quote between an exchange that Brandon had with one of the cast members, well, not cast members, characters while the movie was playing. Apparently, that one of the characters, a kid in the movie, said, "Is he killed?" And then Brandon responded with, "No, he doesn't."
No, he doesn't.
But other than that, like I won't lie, this movie has not stuck with me very much ever since we saw it. Honestly, like when you said this was your pick, I for a second was like, shit, have I seen this one? And I was like, sure enough, I have. But yeah, I don't know. It's not my favorite of the Friday the 13th, and it's definitely not my favorite among the slashers. But I can definitely see why you'd pick this one, especially considering like just like all the things that you pointed out, as well as just like the fact it's like it's like a class. It very much embodies the 1980s horror era, which is pivotal. So, thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Alrighty. Well, Brandon, let's get into your number 2.
All right, from one slasher to another, I'm gonna pick Scream 2022.
Very nice. I knew a Scream would be in here.
Well, I wanted to pick the rebootquel that is the one that came out this year. I am a big Scream fan. That was like this and Cabin in the Woods were like my what introduced me to the horror genre and what made me kind of fall in love with it rather than be like just like scared to dip my toe in. Because you look and you see a bunch of like early 2010s. Well, we grew up in an era that was pretty bad for horror, I'd say. Ethan and I have talked extensively about how like the films of the 2010s all look like they're terribly color graded, poorly acted. They get no-name actors. Like if you look at the Final Destination film or any of the Platinum Dune remakes, they all are so yucky and bland. So it made it really hard to get into horror films because there was nothing stylized, nothing very interesting going on. And Scream was the first that really caught my eye and was like, wow, this could actually be interesting because not only is it commenting on the genre and using humor as a way to invite its audience in, but it also like embraces the genre. And I think Scream 2022 does that extremely well. It was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I was nervous about its January release, but oh my God, like it just really impressed me. I think it's very interesting to see the characters like kind of playing upon the idea of the reboot and how that's kind of taken over Hollywood, especially with horror films. But also, I really like all the characters in it. I think there are some good ones that are good comps to the original, like the Meeks kids, who are Randy's nephews and niece. I love the integration of the old cast with the new cast. I think the new cast stands on their own though, so they didn't need to bring back like Nev Campbell, David Arquette, or Courtney Cox. And I think they captured like the magic and tone of Scream without Wes Craven, which I didn't think was possible. And I really appreciated that. Now, is everybody going to love this movie? I think a lot of people are going to be turned off by that third act, but I quite like it. And I think it's probably like it was like the next logical step for them to take because of who the killer is.
Right. And for me, I don't know, that killer reveal kind of lost me personally, just because I felt like their reasoning behind becoming the killer was very, the Scream franchise doesn't stray away from sometimes being heavy-handed in its meta-ness. I mean, that's what it's built on, is it's meta horror, it's like very integrated into the its franchise and its tropes. But I just felt like this one was just a little over the top personally. It didn't make all that much sense to me, but it's certainly one of the better Scream films for me. I almost picked Scream 2, which is my personal favorite Scream film. Contrary to popular belief, I think everyone's sleeping on Scream 2. It's better than any of the other ones because I feel
disclaimer. Disclaimer: he was high out of his mind watching it.
Disclaimer, that still made me really enjoy how Shakespearean it was, and how it's the first film to sort of really dive into ultra meta-ness, because now the Scream story is now acknowledged in the films because it was remade into a film in the universe. Anyways, but the 2022 Scream, I think it has great characters. It has some of the better characters in the franchise with the new additions, and you're right, it does a good job of leaving the door open to us not needing to bring back the older characters, the original 3 from the first Scream movie, which is cool, and I'm interested to see what they're going to call the next Scream movie. Are they going to call it Scream 6? Do you think they're going to call it that, Brandon?
I really don't know. Like, on one hand, I think they were like, people were like, are they gonna call it 5 Cream, the 5th one?
Five they didn't Cream.
5 Cream.
Because like Scriptorum.
No,
that's
yeah.
But like it could be called Screams. They've never done that, or Scream with an exclamation point. Like, because you never know. Because you got to look at because it's commenting on the industry, not just horror films, but the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, at least that's what the newer ones have done. So I'm
Scream
trying to
kills.
look at or the Scream,
Scream ends. The Scream.
I have no idea, but
The Scream.
The one Scream to rule the
I think that might be, if I had to put money on it, I'm gonna go with The Scream.
The Scream. The Scream. Chris, what do you think about Scream?
Yeah. Yeah, this one's good. I had a lot of fun with this. I remember this was one of the first movies I saw back in January of this year. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I found myself really engaged with it, even though I'm not the biggest avid fan of the series. I love the way it honed in that meta-ness really well. I really just had so much fun with how the movie comments on the advent of the quote unquote elevated horror and the rise of reboot sequels, while this is also kind of one too, and then obsessive fan culture and all this stuff. Yeah, it's a really fun time to watch this movie. Yeah, and Brandon, you mentioned that your concern is that a lot of people would get turned off by that third act, but honestly, that third act worked for me. I had a lot of fun with that. And when the twist happened, I wasn't exactly the most shell shocked by the reveal, but it was it was still sufficient enough that I would still stayed on board with the movie. And spoiler alert, there's a part of me that kind of had a feeling that it was going to do the thing again where it was two killers, and I had a feeling that Asian girl was going to be one of them, because pretty much the only other film that she's in is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and she plays psycho killer really well. So
that's true.
That in my head, I was like, maybe that was a casting thing. I don't know, but that's just me. Yeah, it's a fun time. If you you could do a lot worse. With horror sequels than this one, and so this is up there for me.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. Where does it? Where does it fall for you within the Scream franchise, Chris? Get very curious.
Okay, wait. So here's the thing about me. I very distinctly I know the first one and this one pretty well. I know I have at least seen 2. I don't know if I've seen 3 and 4. From what I know I've seen, this is the middle one. So it's Scream 1, then this one, then 2. But I haven't revisited them since I was a kid. So
I go 2, 1, then this one, then 4, then 3.
See, for me, I go 1, this one, 4, 2, 3. 3 is the worst one.
It is. It is awful.
It's awful. Yeah.
I just realized this was the first horror franchise that I completed this year out of 3. I completed this one, I completed Final Destination, I completed Hellraiser. Look at me go, making my way through them. Alrighty. Who is up next? Who's up next? It's you, Chris.
Is it okay? My next film is a movie that also came out this year. I actually saw it kind of recently. I'm picking T. West's Pearl, which is
Oh, there
technically
we
a
go.
prequel, but sequel, I
I
feel
feel
like
like
that's
it has to be seen as a sequel.
yeah.
You know.
Okay, Pearl. So for anyone who doesn't know, Pearl is the prequel to X, which also came out this year. It tells the story of the character of Pearl, who we got to know in the first film. It tells the story of this girl who has big dreams and goes through. And I don't want to spoil too much because I feel like this is the kind of movie that works really well if you don't know very much going into it. But I thought it was really it did take me a second to get into this movie because I had to kind of reorient myself from seeing this as a horror film and more so seeing it as a psychological drama almost. I thought the character is surprisingly compelling. Mia Goth delivers an amazing performance in this film. Um, yeah, but it does have a couple of issues along the way. Like for me personally, like I had some trouble seeing Pearl as both a sympathetic character, but also our sinister villain. Um, but nonetheless, it's a really interesting character piece, which I know it can be hit or miss for some people, but for my money, like this worked really well. I love T. West's direction in this. I feel like he really does have a vision for what he's going for, and it makes me all the more excited to see how this ends off with Maxine,
Yeah.
which whenever that comes out. But yeah, Pearl is like a movie that I feel like is unfortunately going to get swept under the rug, which I don't think it deserves because I do think it is worth its while. And yeah, I do advise people go see this, especially if you have seen X. Like the intertextuality between those two films is fantastic. Also, yeah, just good, like just good movie all around. Like as a horror film, like it's great. Um, Brandon, you are a big, you're very passionate about X. Pearl was good, but not great. So what was it for you?
Just very different, when I went in to see it, like I had seen the trailers like once or twice. I had seen the post-credit trailer for it
Right.
after
Yeah,
X,
totally.
and I was like, are we going to get that movie this year? Because it's been a while since we've gotten a movie sequel within the same year that, like, the Matrix movies is when I think, the
Right.
second and third Matrix came out like 6 months apart, and this is the same thing. So I had faith because I was like, it seems like the movie's already done, basically. And then watching it, I was like you, but it didn't take me super long to reorient myself. I knew right away as the credits were like rolling, as it was like doing its Technicolor, like 1940 style thing, instead of it being like an opening, like book, you know how like in the 50s they use title cards more. Here it was like they overlay it in it. And I was like, okay, this movie's not going to be a horror film. And like the longer the film went on, the more I started to realize that, and the more I kind of appreciated it for what it was. And I really liked it. Do I have issues with the movie? Yeah, I think I think it's great to have a character like Pearl, just because like she can be an active antagonist in this film, to be honest, while also being the protagonist.
Yeah.
But in the first film, she is more just an antagonistic character because you don't really know her. She's a
Yeah.
mysterious creature almost. Based
Yeah.
on how she acts. And here I find it easier to sympathize with her just because I think they do a good job with appearances.
Mm.
And like trying to say like you can't judge a book by its cover,
Yeah.
But I think it's easier to like kind of relate to her just because of like Mia Goth's performance in the film. Until she goes crazy in like the back half, like it's kind of easy to see her like she's the victim of being in a strained household that's very conservative and traditional.
Right.
Yeah.
She has a lot of responsibilities she has to bear,
Mm.
and I think that's really good. I prefer X a lot more, but I think it's a good film, admirable.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like Pearl did a good job of cementing this franchise as sort of speaking upon generational horror. Like I feel like the horror that you see in Pearl is not it's not the horror of X, where uh it's like the horror of mortality, you know? Where like some of the scariest sequences in the film are just like these old characters coming to like afraid of their own bodies aging, and like looking at their aged bodies and just being like sad and in terror about that, but whereas this is exposing generational horror for um you know something that I feel like many people experience, especially growing up in conservative households, um of wanting to be something that your family doesn't want you to be, and sort of the madness that can come from that. I'm not in love with Pearl, I think, and I'm not really in love with X either. I think X is good, but on my second rewatch, I think I found a lot more. It's sort of shock value sort of went away, and when a movie's built on shock value for me, it's sort of it doesn't really age well.
Mm.
This there's no real shock value here, which is fine. I just found the film to be a bit slow, which understandably so. It's sort of trying to replicate, the pace and aesthetics of, older films, because it's trying to like emulate what it like how it was made in the time when Pearl lived, which even then movies weren't made like this in the 20s, because it takes place in the 20s, anyways, I do think it's a good film, and a unique film for talking about this in horror, generational trauma. We usually see that more just in straight up dramas these days.
Yeah.
But seeing it taken from a horror lens is super unique and cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. But yeah, that's my second pick.
Good second pick. Let's get into the final round here. I'm picking my third film, which was like the film that sort of takes the genre that it was successful in and added in a whole new thing to sort of make this franchise stand out even more. So yeah, Hellraiser was my world building. Friday the 13th was my meta. This is my genre. And this one is directed by my boy. I love him. Just kidding. I don't love him all the time. James Cameron. I'm doing Aliens. 1986.
Double stack.
Double stack?
Double stack.
Ah, hey.
Wow, I was not I didn't think. Well, I had a feeling maybe someone would be interested in this one, but I didn't think you guys would go for it.
I almost didn't, but I just had to, because I wanted to think of a film that sort of still keeps its horror elements, but adds a whole new genre to it, where it can still be seen as a horror film, but can also be seen as a action film.
Like an action adventure almost.
Yeah. I also think this film, the first Alien it's one of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah,
B,
amazing.
One of my favorite horror films of all time. I still think the first Alien is far superior to Aliens, but Aliens is still a pretty great film. Just because it what few horror franchises do, it builds its characters more. The character of Ripley, played by the wickedly talented Sigourney Weaver. I don't know why I turned to John Travolta for a second there. I think Sigourney Weaver is awesome. She's one of my favorite actresses. But she is even better. I think she's better in Aliens than she's in the first Alien, but even though I like the first Alien more, because she's, we get to further just see how creative of a person she is and how fearless she is in this film, where she's sort of, now she's one of the only ones who really has this experience with the xenomorphs. And it's just, Aliens is a proper next step to raising the stakes, where it's now, one alien, you were trapped with this alien on this one space station. Now this is a planet being overridden, sort of like it's plagued by xenomorphs. And, just by seeing the first movie alone, like that's already scary enough. You're like, now there's like thousands of them, like what are you going to do? But then it becomes like this badass action film where now we have, sort of this final girl of the last film sort of, join the Space Marines and build the squad to go take them down. And it becomes a really thrilling, horrific film because you get to build out more of the lore of the xenomorphs here too, with the queen and sort of the nest. It's not something you really got in the first film. That's now become so iconic with the xenomorph iconography. And just like also having Ellen Ripley become a lot more of a passionate character. You have like the little girl in the movie that now she becomes like sort of like a surrogate mother to. It's just great. Aliens is a film about mothers in a way, where it's interesting because the first one is sort of like this expose dissection on the female body and the invasion of the female body, where this is one is sort of an evolution of like the power of the female body and like becoming a mother, and like it's crazy, it's just such an interesting evolution. I think this is not my favorite James Cameron movie. I think it's my second favorite James Cameron movie. T2 is my favorite one, but he does an outstanding job here. And god damn it, I wish he would make another Alien movie. Stop doing those Avatar movies. Come back and do Aliens, because the Alien franchise needs some, it needs his energy again. Stop playing with those weird blue people. Come play with these weird skeleton creatures instead. Anyways, Chris, we double stacked. What do you think about Aliens?
All right. Yeah, very, very good movie. I remember seeing this even before college, and it stuck with me. Because I remember I had seen the first Alien because my high school film teacher like highly recommended it, and I was like, okay, great. Scared the shit out of me, but amazing. And then I put this one on after, and like first of all, I just think the title of this movie is so clever.
Oh,
just the implication of pluralizing alien is like, oh my god,
that's all you need.
Yeah, that's exactly all you need, and yeah, it works really well. The transition from a pretty like succinct sci-fi horror film into like a sci-fi action adventure, but also still containing horror elements, is very fluid in this movie. Like, even though like, it is a departure, like, and the change in director is quite noticeable in my opinion, it feels consistent enough that I buy the fact that this is the same Ripley. I don't see this as some remake or some offshoot story. Like, it actually, I fully believe that that's the same character. Sigourney Weaver delivers an amazing performance. It's a thrilling adventure movie. I remember watching it and just kind of being like surprised that I was like pumped, while watching this movie, not just like cowering behind a blanket like I was with the first one. Gosh, what else is there to say about this movie? It's just a really fun time. It's also just like a very cleanly well done action movie, which like you can always count on Cameron to deliver. I'm sure he's gonna do so again later this year, much to your doubt, Ethan. But yeah, this works pretty much on all levels. Maybe like the only thing that it's hard because part of me really wants to say that Alien is hands down better than this movie, but like I feel like the movies are both trying to be they're trying to be something that like they're not trying to be the same movie at all.
Yeah.
And I think that works great. I kind of talked about that when I talked about Evil Dead earlier. How Fede Alvarez did not try and rehash the exact same shit from the first movie. He took it and took, inspiration, but largely did his own thing. And I think I can say the same thing about Cameron in this case. Brandon, anything you want to add about Aliens?
I don't think it's a horror film. That's why I didn't pick it.
But it's a sequel to a horror, so
yes.
Think about it.
And it's still scary. Xenomorphs are scary.
I don't really think it's that scary. I think the aliens.
Many things are that scary.
You also don't think xenomorphs are Did you call it? You called it a being.
They're
You called it
beings.
something
They're
else.
beings. They're not.
Yeah, you didn't call it a
they're
monster.
beings.
You wouldn't call it a monster. You called it a being.
It's a being. It's
What does
fine.
that mean?
Everything's a being.
I like this movie. I'm kind of with you guys. Like I'm not. I go back and forth whether or not it's better than the original Alien. I think this movie isn't as well made as the first one, and I think that has a better atmosphere. And that's what gives me more, because the alien character, meaning the xenomorph, kind of loses its mystique after the first Alien.
That's true. Yeah.
Because when you go from one stalking creature that you don't know anything about and a bunch of face huggers to literally hundreds, and then you scale it back to literally none. Well, a half of one in Alien 3.
Yeah,
and
it's like, where'd you go from there? Like,
it's
James
like,
Cameron sort of wrote the franchise into a corner, but he made a good
yeah,
film.
yeah, and that's why I'm like, okay, so it's not really scary anymore because it's de-scaried. But like the original Alien's one of the scariest horror films I've ever seen. You know,
Yeah.
I think the tagline does it justice. I think it's a gorgeous movie.
Yeah.
This one it's a different tone entirely, and I think he just kind of ruined. Cameron knows how to make sequels, as is evident by T2 as well.
Yeah.
But like he kind of knows how to make like the sequel that is the ultimate sequel, and then you don't need to make another one. You know what I mean? Which is why I'm concerned about the other Avatar movies. But
you think he's just gonna like write himself in the corner with two? There's no way, because he wrote all of them out. Like, even
at the same time. Yeah.
My Avatar whateverness aside, I think he does have a plan with all 5 of these movies, whether I agree with that plan or not. But it's a plan, so I don't think you need to be worried.
Okay. Well, but you know what I mean in terms of his situational stuff. Because like, where do you go after T2? You know, that's a great subversive storyline. Aliens, same fucking thing.
Yeah.
But then when you get, it's like, those are like singular plots that evolve into something way more complicated. And I think it's a great movie. I'm not going to slouch on it. I think the finale of Aliens is one of my favorite finales in all of cinema.
Yeah.
It is very fun.
Where Ripley's trying to save the kid and she's in the mech suit and you've got the alien head.
Mom
it's great. It's great, but I always think the first one is like top notch. That movie's just so special.
So good.
Yeah.
I think that movie's aged incredibly well. I need to rewatch it.
I want to rewatch both of these. I want to do a double feature because I haven't seen Aliens in such a long time either. Anyways,
well, there we go.
That's that. So let's go
Round
on to
it
the
out.
last movie now. Brandon, what's your last horror sequel, bud?
I wanted to pick something supernatural, ghostly, if you will. I'm picking a Leigh Whannell film. I'm picking Insidious Chapter 3.
What?
Wow. Insidious 3.
Yes. So it's not even a James Wan Insidious movie, you know, because he only did the first 2. And the first one's good, and the second one's not very good, I think. Story-wise, it kind of falls off, and you're like, well, what's the third one going to be about? And the third one is actually, like, I forget if it's, like, Final Destination 5 and the fact that it's kind of like a stealth prequel. I'm pretty sure it is. But it takes place before, but with not the characters that you're used to seeing. Like the Patrick Wilsons of the world, the Rose Byrneses. And it follows this just inconsequential like teenage girl who breaks one of her legs or both of her legs. I can't remember. But she is basically trapped in a wheelchair in her room like a lot of the movie. And she's haunted by this demon who is like much more spry than her. And it's really hard for horror movies to scare in the daylight. And this movie has a sequence that is utterly terrifying to me. I don't know if Chris, have you seen Insidious 3?
Not the third one, no.
Okay, there's a scene where she falls off her bed, and Leigh Whannell does such a good job at stretching the tension, which I think a lot of horror movie directors could benefit from. Some take it too far and stretch it, and like there's nothing scary about it. It's great thematically, but I think it doesn't like unsettle the viewer. But I think he does it in a way that is like perfect. And he really needs to get more. This was like his introductory feature, like after like separating from James Wan, as like now he's doing like The Invisible Man. He's doing like action movies. He did Upgrade, but like this was his like, I'm doing my own thing, even if it's a franchise that we both spun off of, and I really enjoy it. I think there's a lot of good here too, with character building about Lin Shaye's character, about Leigh Whannell's own character in the film. That sort of develops the agency and what the franchise is good at doing about ghost hunting and what's so intoxicating about it that weird people step into the profession, but also is so like terrifying if you are like superstitious about ghosts and stuff. So and it's the last good Insidious movie. I'm not expecting the Patrick Wilson one to be good, but 4 was garbage. I had to watch that in theaters because when I worked at the theater, I had to sit in on movies. PG-13 horror movies, be the usher that stood in there and made sure nobody recorded the movie or made noise to disturb the rest of the audience. Because this happened with Insidious 4 and The Bye-Bye Man. I was like, I had to watch those movies like 5 times. I'm like, fuck. Once you see it that many times, it's not very good.
I had no idea Patrick Wilson's directing the 4th one. That's crazy.
The 5th one. Yeah.
The fifth one.
The fifth one. Sorry. I haven't seen any of these Insidious movies. This might be my next biggest horror blind spot that I need to watch this month is just at least the first one.
The first one is like genuinely like terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like a effective way to do PG-13 horror.
I'm a big fan of James Wan when he's going all horrific, you know?
Yeah.
I don't have much to say because I haven't even seen any of these. The third one, that sounds good. It sounds a lot like Rear Window, but in a horror sense, you know? She's got both her legs broken, and she's sort of stuck in a space. That could lead to something very scary. You know, that's sort of the helplessness. It's interesting.
It also makes her a better person because the protagonist of the film isn't exactly the best person.
Yeah.
But also like it's all about overcoming like trauma and stuff like that too. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it was one of the first films that came out when I started working at the theater. And I did rewatch it, you know, after, because I got it on DVD. And I remember thinking, like, actually kind of lives up. Like, I wasn't expecting it to. But it stands on its own. Like Chris said, like a good horror movie, a good sequel stands on its own. And Insidious Chapter 3 does. Not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it works immensely well.
Groovy.
Well, all right.
All right.
All right. Well, there's our movies, guys. There's our horror sequels. Let's run them down before we get to this final stack. Starting with my stack, I did Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, Jason Lives, and Aliens. Brandon, what's your stack?
I had Dawn of the Dead, Scream 2022, and Insidious Chapter 3.
In order, my man. Chris, what about you?
My films were Evil Dead, Pearl, and Aliens.
Alrighty. So we already know Aliens is on here. Oof. Toughie. This is a toughie.
I think we should have a slasher film on there.
Absolutely.
Because Aliens is like kind of your monster movie representation.
Yeah.
Or being movie.
Because
it's not really a monster.
It is. It's an animal. Yeah. So we're looking at Jason Lives, Scream, Pearl. One of those. I don't know if Hellraiser 2 is one. You see, the first 2 Hellraiser movies aren't slasher movies. They're more just torture, like supernatural movies. I don't know. I wouldn't consider them slasher. But, What are we thinking? What are we thinking for slasher? I'd be fine with any of these, honestly. Maybe I'd be okay with Scream because, some it's a movie that's very aware of like the the concept of a horror sequel. You know, would have preferred Scream 2, but this one's good too as well. You know, I'm not complaining. Um, and I think I don't know. I would like to also maybe have the Evil Dead on there because that
That
also
could be our supernatural pick because it's not a slasher.
That's true. But also Dawn of the Dead. I don't know. It's so hard because Dawn of the Dead is that is also like one of the horror sequels because that created zombie films. You know, sure, Night of the Living Dead like it was the first, but Dawn like that's the one that really did it. You know,
They're just people in Night of the Living Dead.
yeah, they're just scary people.
They're just like slow moving.
These are like zombies. Like that's the ones with the body parts falling off. You know.
Yeah, makeup. Chris, what do you think?
Is there a movie that Brandon you are especially wanting to put forward
From my
yours?
stack?
Yeah.
I think we could. I honestly, just for how like much of a improvement it is over the previous sequel, I would go with Insidious 3 for my stack.
Really?
Because I think the second one is like it's such a even though it's a James Wan film, it feels like a departure from the original in tone and stuff. And then here I think it melts that tone perfectly. And I might be like crazy for that because like I don't know if like it was reviewed well critically at all, but the third one I mean. Scream is really good. I could use Scream in a lot of places, but we have like 5 Scream films to exploit here.
Yeah.
Soon to be 6, and I think we already used the first one.
You got to think about also watching this as a
triple feature.
Like, is it easier to get into Insidious 3 than it is to Scream 5?
Well, it's a stealth prequel, so like it doesn't really like tie into the other 2 Insidious films until like the very last scene of the movie.
Right.
So like that makes it like clear there. And Scream 5, but like Scream 5 could be watched if you hadn't seen the other Scream movies because it's a rebootful, like mostly new characters. It's just you won't have the same profound effect if you don't. That's the difficulty. I think Insidious just because it's so different from Aliens, you know.
Yeah, I can get behind Insidious.
Okay.
But what would we put to complement for the final?
I would like Jason Lives if that's anything because that's like a big
slasher pick.
Slasher, you know. I feel like we haven't had those.
And we're all covering different bases. Aliens is the second film. Insidious is the third film. Jason Lives is the 6th film.
Is there a 4th one on this list? Did anyone choose a 4th?
No.
You should have chosen Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Brandon. What the hell? Oh, well.
I thought about it, but I didn't want to retread old ground. I wanted to pick new movies.
That's fine. I respect that. Would you guys be down for Jason Lives? Because I mean, it's like a slasher, and that's also also sort of our meta pick because we don't have a meta pick.
I think I feel like I've exhausted my what to say on Friday the 13th Part 6. Yeah.
Yeah. I can rock with it.
Okay. How should we order this? What do you think? What do you think it's a good way to start this off?
I think we should do Insidious, Aliens, Friday the 13th Part 6.
Give me your reason.
Because prequel could be viewed as a standalone. If you haven't seen Alien, it doesn't really matter.
Uh-huh.
And then clearly a sequel.
Clearly a sequel.
Because
they Jason is.
And they resurrect
they bring him
Jason. So it just feels like a natural thing. And if you could view it as that, you could view it as like its own franchise.
That's true. Chris, you cool with that?
Yeah,
I like that.
I can rock with that. I like that.
All right, let's do it. So this is Stack's official horror sequel movie stack. for our 2022 Halloween-a-thon. Brandon, kick off the stack for us with our first pick.
Our first pick is Insidious Chapter 3, an underrated stealth prequel to the original first two Insidious films that examines the ghost world and how it affects the humans and how humans hunt ghosts. Very fun movie.
Fun movie. Chris, what's our second pick?
Cool. Our second pick is T West 2022 psychodrama Pearl, and pretty fantastic.
Nah,
Wait,
it's not.
Sorry, why am I saying
It's
Pearl?
Aliens.
Jesus, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong part of my list. My bad. Sorry.
Someone really
Sorry.
wanted Pearl to be on the film.
Sorry. Sorry.
You were looking at your stack. I get it.
Yeah. Okay. So our number two is Aliens, directed by James Cameron in 1986. A fantastic action adventure follow up to the original Alien, directed by whatever the
Ridley
fuck his name
Scott.
is. Ridley Scott. And I'm losing it. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. Highly recommend. The action's fantastic. Very easy to get along with. I don't know why I'm rambling now. Highly recommend. Go check it out. Aliens.
All right. My turn. And our last film is the sixth Friday the 13th movie. Who knew it took six entries for this franchise to finally get good, but it did. They got there. They finally got there. A franchise that sort of pokes fun at the meta-ness of the slasher franchise, of the state of slashers as Hollywood loves to just milk them dry, by just pointing out, like, these are tropes that slashers indulge themselves in, and they just have fun with it, Jason comes back to life. He kills people. There's the camp, all the iconography you need. I think it's a quintessential Friday the 13th film. If you were to watch just one, I'd probably recommend this one. Jason Lives. That is our last one. And that's our stacked, everybody. That's episode 94. I think we're halfway through this Halloween-a-thon. Got two more. Or one more. Oh, we only got one more. One more after this. Our last Halloween-a-thon installment for this year. What's it going to be? Leave us some recommendations if you want in the comments. We'll look them over. See if it's good enough. Huh? See if it's good enough to be on the stack. If you have any ideas, let us know. Come on. I'd like to thank our guest today, Michael Jackson. I'm sorry we skipped you every single time, but is there anything you'd like to say to the listeners?
One time I asked to use the restroom, and they said, sure, it's right around the corner there. Once I went in the restroom, they locked me in there for like 45 minutes. There was doo-doo feces thrown all over the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and it stunk so bad. Then one of the policemen came by the window and he made a sarcastic remark. He said, does it smell good enough for you in there? How do you like the smell? Is it good? And I just simply said, it's all right.